Hello everyone, and welcome back to the OptiTrack Live Link tutorial for Unreal Engine. If you've been following every video in the series so far, congratulations. You now should understand the backbone of everything mocap in Unreal Engine. Now that we have covered all of the meticulous setup so far, it is now time to move on to Mocap Manager, a toolset that I have alluded to in some other videos, but now it's time to go over it. The Performance Capture Workflow plugin is a new native plugin in Unreal that enables this Mocap Manager toolset. This plugin takes everything we've done so far and simplifies it and organizes things with much more automation. The reason that we didn't cover this sooner is because I feel that it is important that you understand the process of the setup so far, just in case some of the automation fails for you. Mocap Manager also only currently works with skeletal meshes, which means our metahuman blueprint doesn't work out of the box. This means that we're going to have to intertwine a little bit of the work we've done so far with this new workflow. There are a couple of things here and there that we will want to discuss for this video, so it isn't going to be as scripted as other videos so far. With all of that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So I wanted to jump right into this video and kind of just get started, do a walkthrough and talk at the same time about all of the things that Mocap Manager has to offer. So the first things first, if you go to Edit and Plugins, the plugin that we're looking for is called Performance Capture Workflow. So just go ahead and enable that and then restart your project, and you'll then get access to the Mocap Manager toolset. The Performance Capture Workflow plugin also includes a couple of other classes that are necessary for Mocap Manager, and it allows us to then get access to those and mess with things. So I'm gonna close this, and the way to get Mocap Manager open once you've restarted your project is you go to Window, and then you can go to Virtual Production and Mocap Manager. So everything inside of Mocap Manager basically replaces what we had. So the first thing we'll do is we'll just click this plus sign here to create missing assets. And we're gonna just go ahead and click yes to create this PCAP folder where all of our Mocap Manager assets are going to be stored. If we were to click no, we could choose that location that we want all of the assets to go into. However, I'm okay with just having the PCAP folder. So I'll click yes. And then it's going to ask us for a new session. So all we need to do is type in new session. So we'll say video demo, as that's what this is. And then I'll click create new session. And once it creates the session, you'll see it makes that as the default. And then we get the green check mark. So Mocap Manager is basically that. We just have what I would call a wizard where you go through every button here and you just follow all the steps to basically get to the same position that we were in at the end of the retargeting video, or even at the end of the facial capture video. So we'll keep going, and this one's really important, the spawn stage button. So I'm just gonna spawn it and you'll see what happens. I need to click the stage root first, but we'll click spawn stage and you'll see it spawns in some truss, just some basic truss in the map, and you can select this and you can move things around however which way you want in the level. But what's really nice about this is that any asset that we make, such as a motive avatar, a metahuman, or even rigid bodies, will all be moved along with this stage root. So this is very similar to the mocap parent that we made manually. What's also nice is that you have these buttons here where you could either hide the stage and all of the child actors, or you could just hide the stage itself, but you get to keep the motive avatar and other actors. That's really all this stage has to offer, so we can go on from here. Here in the motion is the biggest thing that we care about. So, like I said, it's like a wizard. We'll just go from left to right at this point. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a performer. So I've got this motive take going right now where it's just a small range of motion of skeletal data with a marker set, and we're going to be using that to create a new proportioned mesh. So I talked about this proportioned mesh and Mocap Manager in previous videos where I said that you want to do this to get the best retarget possible, and we're finally getting to see what that looks like. So to start, I'll just choose the base skeletal mesh. So the base skeletal mesh I'll choose is the 7-segment spine one. So it's this one here, and I'm gonna just select it and then click my live link subject as skeleton 001 from motive. And then I'll click this launch workflow button. The next thing I want to do is I'm actually going to scroll all the way back to the T-pose in my take, and we're going to look at how closely these skeletons override. So we could see that
is the proportions that we want to make. So we're going to want to make a new skeletal mesh of these proportions so that the IK rig that we have will actually have an understanding of the proportioned data coming from motive. That will end up making our retarget a lot better. So for this, I'm going to call this Jacob underscore scaled. And I'm clicking this constrain pelvis option because I want the pelvis to stay at the origin of the world. So I'll click create mesh in IK rig, and you can see there for a second it created that new mesh. And now down here under create new performer, it actually put everything in automatically for us. So really quick, I want to show something. So if I click here now, create performer, and then I click spawn performer, you can see we immediately have animation the moment I click play in motive. So we didn't have to set up an animation blueprint to get this working at all. It was just a couple of buttons and then spawn performer, and we were good to go. The thing I want to show is the retarget stuff and proportions that I was talking about a little bit earlier. So here we have the original model of the motive avatar. You can see that its proportions are taller than the data that's coming in. Now, LiveLink is still scaling this data of the scaled avatar just because of how it works. However, it's now using a mesh, a skeletal mesh that actually is proportionally scaled. And we could see that by dragging and dropping this new skeletal mesh that we just got from Mocap Manager. So you could see this is the original one that's been unmodified with scale, and this one is the new one. And this new one is what's being used inside this IK rig here. And again, this ultimately means that we will get a better retarget.
And I wanted to mention a feature that goes hand in hand with this new proportioned character. So in Motive, we have a feature that is really nice for this. So let's say that you have a performer that comes in and captures data multiple times over the course of your entire project. So you want to keep the same proportions for that asset. You don't want to have a bunch of files of that performer at different scales and different proportions each time. So what you could do is if you have the asset here in Motive, you can export this asset and keep it as this person's asset. And then if you put it back into Motive, you can actually go through a refine stage here to refine its range of motion. But the really important part is if you go to the assets and then under refinement here, you can turn on solve constraints only. So this will not update the bone positions when you do the range of motion refinement, making it so that the proportions of this asset stays the same. And it also means that you can use that same skeleton in Unreal Engine as well to get your best retarget and keep it the same throughout your entire project. So this is a really nice feature that goes hand in hand with Mocap Manager.
And you can see that it created the goals in the settings and all of the retarget information that we need inside of this IK rig. I'll go ahead and close that now, and I'll click play again. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was metahumans. So with Mocap Manager, unfortunately, you can only really make Mocap Manager work with skeletal meshes. However, there is a way to actually make metahumans still work inside Mocap Manager and utilize all of the nice things that it has to offer. So we're going to go to my metahuman file here, and we can see that we've got our metahuman dragged and dropped into the scene now. And if I go into the body of my metahuman, this is what we're going to be using to create the metahuman asset within Mocap Manager. And you'll see what I mean right now. So I'm going to change the character name here to mh_Jacob. So next, I'm going to choose the source performer asset as the one that we just created. So this is the performer asset from our performer section, which is this motive avatar here right now. Character class, you can keep that as is. And then the character mesh is going to be this mesh right here. You can see that the button immediately highlighted saying that it's able to be pressed, because Unreal is actually going to automatically create a IK rig and retargeter for us. So I'll just go ahead and click create character asset, and then I now have the option to spawn this character. So now that I've spawned the character, you can see that only the hands and the ankles are animating, which is totally fine. That's what we actually told it to do. If you come over to this all section, you can see we can actually hide each of these assets, and we've got some more properties here. One thing I want to point out is the motive avatar's color. So currently it's not actually taking in color account because this doesn't work on initialization, but you could see that if we adjust the color, you can actually get it to change the color on the motive avatar's stitching, which I thought that was pretty cool. So then the question is, how do we actually get metahumans animating using Mocap Manager now at this point? So what we're going to do is very similarly to the retargeting video is we're going to create a new animation blueprint. Now, if you have been following so far, you should have an animation blueprint already. And we're just going to jump into this animation blueprint right now because what we can do is actually use the retarget asset that was made for us by Mocap Manager. And that one seems to be right here. So I'll just click compile, save, and we can close this. Now let's double check under the body that we have this, so we don't. So let's add it really quick. So ABP underscore MH underscore Jacob. And now that is active. Now all we need to do is drag and drop this metahuman under the Mocap Manager stage under Jacob underscore scaled. Click none again, and then we'll need to zero out the translation. And in the metahuman here, all we need to do is add the live link skeletal component. And there we go. We've got animation. So some things that we're still missing and things that we need to cover is if we go into the PCAP folder and we jump into the characters, we have our IK rig here. And I touched on this at the end of the retargeting video, but Unreal Engine automatically created these IK rigs for us. So it, of course, made this metacarpal retarget chain that we don't need. So we can go in and delete these. And this was kind of the whole point of me showing you all of the back end of how this stuff is created in Unreal, because I want you to take away from this video that Mocap Manager simply uses all of these assets in the back end of this automation process of what this toolset is. And we can go in and modify these assets and you actually know what you're looking for. So now that we've changed the metacarpals there, we're good to go. We can close this. And another thing that we want to do is we also want to add facial animation. But let's actually go ahead and get the retarget tuned first. So in Mocap Manager, you have this little button here that says Tune Retarget. Now, if you have ever used Motion Builder, this may look a little bit familiar to you. So this is just the new retarget window. It basically has all of the same settings that this retarget has right here. If you click into any of these settings, you'll see that it's all the same stuff here. But I'm going to close the retarget asset because you can actually just click this button that says open retarget asset, and it's the same exact asset here. So whatever the tune retarget button has in Mocap Manager or whichever character you're animating onto, you'll be able to click that and open up these settings here. Okay, so of course I need to tune my retarget. And luckily, I've already done this video once before, so I know what should work. And I'll tell you, it is not the same thing of what we did for the retarget in the retarget video. So what is going to stay the same is I'm going to go to the pelvis here, and I'm going to set the blend to source translation to 1. And then I'm going to go to the goals for all the hands, feet, and spine, and I'm going to set that to 1 as well. But I'm not going to go to the FK on the feet and change the translation mode like I did before. I'm actually going to go to the pelvis, and you can see that the knees are still bending. I'm going to go to the pelvis, and I'm going to say scale vertical to 1.03. So that should fix the knees a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change affect IK vertical to 1, and this should help out the animation. And the affect IK vertical here made it so that any changes that happen because of this scale change will get directed to the vertical movement of the IK goals. So now if I click play, you can see the animation is playing through and it is looking pretty decent. So in Mocap Manager, instead of going to the visibility of the motive avatar in the outliner, we can simply go to this Jacob scaled asset here and just hide this and see what the animation looks like here. So one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually get facial animation onto this metahuman as well. And it's basically the same process as the video that we did going over facial animation. So I've already got my metahuman face going on here, and I've turned off head orientation, translation, and head stabilization, and I've captured my neutrals. So I will go to the metahuman section folder for myself here, and then I'll jump into the animation blueprint that we've got here. And I'm just going to give this a quick refresh, and then I'll click compile, and you can see my facial expressions are animating. So now I'll close this, and I can just go into my metahuman here, go to the facial skeletal mesh component, and then apply this animation blueprint to the face skeletal mesh. And then I'm going to come down to the live link button here, or the live link component, I mean, and select auto activate. And now you can see things are animating along with the body. So that's basically how you use Mocap Manager to get animation and metahumans working correctly. I'm going to go ahead and click Save Changes for the retarget that we tuned here. Now, you can make a couple more changes, however which way you'd like, but one thing I did want to point out is the method of me getting metahumans to work here is actually a little bit different than what Unreal Engine has stated. Now, I've tried using the same method that they have done in a tutorial video that I'll actually show on screen, and I'll even put it in the description of this video too. But the important thing is that I've tried this, and for some reason, I just couldn't get it to work with facial animation. Everything else worked except for the facial animation part of it. Now, I'll quickly talk about what that was. So the way that they wanted you to do it is if you go to the characters, you have this character class here, and you can create a character class which is basically just copying whatever your metahuman blueprint is. You just go and copy all of the same components that make up your metahuman into this new character class, and then you apply it here when you create your new character. After you apply it, you can then create a virtual live link subject that combines both the body and face data, and then use that to drive the metahuman that you spawn in. And then you can do some stuff in the blueprint to make everything load on initialization, but it's still complicated and has a lot more steps. And I think that this method, truth be told, just seems a little easier, as I've found it to be working just fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transfer over the animation that we have here onto a different take with rigid body capture, so we can talk about getting props in here as well. Okay, so we have this take that I've been using for basically everything when it comes to props and even figure capture data. So if you're following along, it should mostly look like this so far, but now let's go ahead and add that sword in like we did last time. So in our Mocap Manager section, it's pretty self-explanatory. You can just go and follow each of these options or click the launch workflow button where it also does the same thing. But I'll just go through here. So the live link subject that we're going to select is going to be the sword, and then the prop name, we're just going to call it katana. And the prop class will continue to be the same prop class. And for this, I'm looking for _opti katana here. Now we just click create prop asset, and it should spawn in after we click spawn. And there we go. We got our prop. So it's pretty easy. It just follow the wizard and you should get all of the things tracking that you need to. So I think that's everything that I wanted to cover in the motion section, but I did also mention that in the OptiTrack live link display that you don't need to use that anymore because you can just use this data. So if you click this eyeball here, it'll actually show all of the live link data that you have. And we can see how close our retarget actually matches up with our metahuman here. So it does a pretty good job. We're getting the data that we're looking for, and yeah, we can basically hide this from now. So the next sections that I want to talk about here in Mocap Manager are this record button. I think it might be best to actually split up this section of Mocap Manager's record section and take recorder into its own video. In the next video, we'll basically pick up where we left off. Thanks so much for watching. As always, we'll see you in the next one.